Hey everyone, welcome back to The Sensitivity Doctor. Today I have a very interesting conversation with Brian Sharpless about exploding head syndrome. Yeah, you heard that right. Not only that, but things like sleep paralysis and a bunch of other sleep disorders I have literally never heard of. So if you're someone who struggles with nightmares, if you're someone who hears a loud boom before you go to sleep, or maybe you're sleeping with an unsettled partner in bed and you want to know how to help them, this episode is absolutely for you. Brian was full of knowledge and such an adept researcher in the area and has a really cool new book that we'll drop the link in the bio so you can check it out. So it's time to learn about some of the weirdest, wackiest sleep disorders you and I have ever heard of and what you can do about them. Enjoy. Brian, I'm really excited to have you here because we had an episode a while back about insomnia specifically with a really amazing CBTI coach and educator. But sleep is something that highly sensitive people with trauma, really all of us, let's be honest, not just HSPs, struggle with sleep. But you specifically have published so many articles, like legitimate articles, on certain things about sleep that sound so scary and terrifying and so different. Even after all the things I've done with exploring sleep, I had never heard of some of these before. So I hope I can pick your brain about some of these today.
I specialize in unusual stuff, so I'm happy to come.
Yeah. So actually, maybe you can introduce yourself first, just a little bit about who you are and why you love unusual stuff.
I should get on the couch for this.
Yeah, right.
Well, I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, a researcher, and an author. I have a half-time private practice, and the rest of the time I give lectures, do research, write, do lots of fun things like that. I'm not happy doing any one thing to the exclusion of other things.
I can appreciate that.
So, yeah. In my practice, I specialize primarily in treating personality, sleep, and unusual and rare psychological disorders, and also doing clinical supervision, primarily from psychodynamic and cognitive behavioral perspectives. In terms of why I like unusual things, I kind of always have since I was a kid. I'd always be reading about supernatural stuff, paranormal stuff, conspiracy theories. And I started out doing more traditional research in anxiety disorders in my graduate program at Penn State. And on postdoc, I was on a panic disorder grant with Jacques Barber and Diane Chambliss and a few folks. And I started wondering about the relationship between isolated sleep paralysis, which is the experience of going to sleep or waking up and finding yourself completely unable to move. So it's not just like your limbs are heavy or you're really tired. You are atonic, except for your eyes. And so along with this, which is scary.
Can you make sure to let people know what that means?
Yeah, you can't move.
Okay.
you have, yeah. And so along with that, which is scary enough, a good chunk of folks also have hallucinations. So they're dreaming while they're awake. And the majority of the time, you're not dreaming happy things. There are attackers in the room. There are people saying strange things at you. So at the time when I started looking at this phenomenon, there was a belief that this might be really highly correlated with panic disorder. And some people were speculating it might actually be an African-American variant of panic disorder because there was a good bit of literature showing that in African-American population. So it's not true. It's
Yeah, I was
pretty
going to
wide
say,
across.
I can think of a Caucasian client I have with this disorder, this issue, and I cannot wait to share this episode with her.
Yeah. So I started wanting to see what it was about, how it affected people. So I developed a clinical interview. I trained some graduate students on how to administer it. And so over the course of assessing everybody in the panic study, we gave them this interview on sleep paralysis. And along not just establishing whether it was present or not, but how and if it affected them. What were the things they experienced during it? And did it actually, apart from the other things they were suffering from, did it cause problems in their life? Were they really worried about it? Was it causing them to avoid certain things? And I found out in that study that of the people that had it, 45% of people had significant consequences from it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
what?
Yeah, they were afraid of sleep. They were afraid that they were going to be permanently paralyzed or die.
Oh,
It really
geez.
ran the gamut of
Yeah.
some catastrophic interpretations. And so I kept studying that, and that was kind of my gateway disorder, a strange disorder, I guess, rare and unusual disorder. I started studying exploding head syndrome.
Yes, let's slow the train down. Exploding head syndrome. When
Yeah,
I
sure.
read that, I
Yes.
my head almost exploded. No, honestly, because I've never heard of that.
Yeah.
It sounds terrifying, almost unbelievable. So, what is it and why does it happen?
Yes, it's a very colorful name. It's probably the most dramatic name in the medical lexicon. I'm
It's
kind of
probably going to be in the title of this episode, just to lure you all in.
Sure, sure. It does get media attention. Remind me to tell you of the conspiracy theory connection in a minute. But
Oh,
in
okay.
a nutshell, what happens is kind of like sleep paralysis. You experience this in transitions to and from sleep. But instead of being paralyzed, what happens during exploding head syndrome is you hear a massively loud noise. People describe it in various ways. It could sound like a gunshot, a bomb going off.
Oh my gosh.
One of the most colorful examples I heard was like those old cartoons where the coyote is trying to get the roadrunner and he drops a piano from like 40
Like an
stories up.
anvil?
Yeah, no, a
Yeah.
piano. And then it hits
Oh,
and
the
boom.
piano. Right. I was thinking
Yeah.
of the wrong thing.
Yeah. Or another one described it as a massively loud guitar string breaking. And so you have
Right.
this very amazingly loud perception, or even a sense of explosion, which is why JMS Peirce, who named it, probably gave it that name. You might feel that you're having an explosion in your head. But what's interesting is you hear kind of these diffuse noises. Nobody's hearing symphonies. Nobody's hearing talking or lectures. You're just
Just
hearing
really
this
quick and
very,
abrupt.
exactly, it's less than a
Right.
second.
Huh.
And so people wake up, they're startled. A good chunk of folks actually have the belief they can't breathe. And so
That's
they,
terrifying.
yeah, so they wake up and they're really activated, really upset, and some of them feel like they forget how to breathe. And then they look around. What caused this? Was there a terrorist event in the neighborhood? You know, did
Right.
somebody shoot a neighbor? And so they're left wondering. And most people will experience that like very rarely.
I was going to
But
ask
I
how often. Yeah.
but I've worked with some people. They've experienced it 5 to 7 times a night.
A night? So
Yes.
almost every time their REM cycle is reconnecting?
No, it actually takes place. It's This is a little complicated. I don't know how much in the weeds you get. You're not
Oh, I get in
technically
the weeds here. But
okay. So
I do make sure to ask clarifying questions if I think it might be something too thick.
gotcha. So the perception of people who are having it occurs mostly right as they're going to sleep.
Okay.
Some researchers have been lucky enough to have people in under sleep studies actually experience this. And what they found was they're not technically asleep. They haven't even reached a non-REM stage 1 yet. They are in a state of very relaxed sort of quiescence. And that's when and that kind of ties into the best theory for what we think happens during this. But right as they're about to start going to sleep, that's when they hear this noise. So they perceive themselves to be asleep, but they're really not. And this happens all the time. People can perceive themselves as being awake when they're asleep and asleep when they're awake.
Right. Which is very unnerving. I think there's some kind of insomnia connected to that. Do you remember the name of it?
And insomnia connected to that, and that we just usually call it sleep state misperception.
Right. Okay.
And you can have this phenomenon where parts of your brain are asleep while others are awake. It's not necessarily a uniform process
Oh,
when
that's so
people are going to
wild.
sleep. Yeah, and what we think happens. I'm going to massively oversimplify this, so don't send me angry things on Twitter. I know the brain isn't a computer, but if you think about going to sleep as like shutting a computer down, there's a series of steps you go through. For us, we have to kind of inhibit our visual neurons, our motor neurons. What we think happens is as the brain is trying to inhibit the auditory neurons, instead of sort of inhibiting them, they fire all at once.
Huh.
So there's a massive
Okay.
activation, which is why you get, again, this diffuse,
Boom.
loud,
Yeah.
boomy voice of noise.
Why do you think some bodies do this and some don't? And I'm going to put a two-parter to this question because a lot of people that listen to this podcast consider themselves and are neurodiverse in different ways,
Mhm.
whether it be ADHD or they're on spectrum or they are highly sensitive. And I think about that client I was mentioning.
Okay.
She has, I'd say, I don't want to say severe form of ADHD, but she has very
Yeah.
present ADHD type symptoms. Do you think it's certain nervous systems that are more likely? And the reason I'm also sitting here thinking about my own children,
Okay.
because being a busy working mom, I really value the like nighttime cuddles. It's like one of my favorite things. We read stories, we ease into sleep. It's funny, I'll probably get scathing. Why don't you just let them fall asleep on their own? Because we like it. But, anyways, I really value that time. And so I've noticed my daughter will fall asleep really quickly. And when she does, I always know she's asleep because her body will twitch. And
Mm.
I would consider her to be more kind of nervous system highly sensitive. She's very sensitive nervous system. Whereas my son is, I mean, he's like such a sensitive, compassionate little dude, but I wouldn't say his nervous system is quite as sensitive. And I don't even know he's sleeping.
Hmm.
Like if he falls asleep, and normally he doesn't fall asleep when we're like cuddling or hanging. Do you think that like the type of nervous system someone has plays a role in whether or not this happens? Is it trauma? I mean, have you been able to figure out why this happens for some people more than others?
Yeah, like with a lot of unusual experiences with sleep. Sleep is so complicated. There's a lot of things that can
Totally.
go wrong.
Right.
And some people, I would guess there probably is some sort of biological predisposition to it. They've actually identified in sleep paralysis there is a polymorphism or a mutation on the PER2 gene, which seems to make it people more likely to have.
Can you unweed that a little bit?
Yeah, so this is one of on the PER2 gene. It's very responsible for regulating for sleep and wake cycles, and so
Okay.
you can have little mutations or errors in our genetic code, right? And so this seems to be one of the ways that makes people more likely to have sleep paralysis. But
Interesting.
anybody, even if you don't have this, you can have
Hmm.
sleep paralysis. I could go into another story with that, but getting back to the exploding head syndrome, we don't quite know that yet. I would guess there is some sort of genetic component to it, but with almost any sleep condition, you can make it happen just through behavioral things, stress,
Hmm.
um, general insomnia and sleep disruption. The if you have one of the two, either isolated sleep paralysis or exploding head syndrome, you're statistically much more likely to have the other two. So once you have one sleep condition, you're more likely to have others. So yeah, but you're getting some strange things going on. It's technically a hallucination too. So you're perceiving a sound as if it's real, but it's not. It's not in the external world. It's being created by you.
So if someone is experiencing this, what can they do about it? Is there anything they can do about it?
Yeah. Well, you won't be shocked to learn there haven't been any clinical trials on exploding head syndrome, right?
I'm not shocked because, like I said, I haven't heard of it until this conversation.
Yeah. Best things to do. First, regulate your sleep cycle. So try to do things that you do for insomnia. Try to go to bed the same time
Mm.
every night. Try to wake up. Try not to take substances like caffeine or alcohol before bed. All things like that. Try and get your sleep as good as possible. For people that have a chronically there are some medications that can be useful. So one of the classes of drugs they used to use to treat headaches called calcium channel blockers. There's been some case studies that show that that might be promising. There's this one anti-seizure medication which was used with folks, and it didn't. It was funny because it didn't make the exploding head syndrome goes away, but it turned down the volume almost. So it
Oh,
became less disruptive, which was one of the most unusual medication effects I've heard.
that's very interesting and
Yeah.
hopeful.
Yeah, yeah, and things like that. So I wrote a chapter where I went through the literature and extracted all the different medications that have been useful. But in general, I mean, you brought up trauma. Trauma really affects sleep in a massive way. Hypervigilance and really your mind racing before you're going to sleep. These things are not conducive to having a nice night's sleep and can really lead to people having these more unusual blips in their sleep cycle. So treating conditions that might be leading to the exploding head syndrome, whether it's trauma or depression or anxiety disorders, can also be useful. But fortunately for most people, it doesn't seem to be a huge problem. I
Reason why
studied.
it probably hasn't been studied that much.
Yeah, yeah, and people don't talk about it.
Mhm.
There's this strange thing I've seen with several conditions that if you have something that falls outside the norm, you don't really have a language or a label to put on it, but you know that this probably isn't what other people experience. You're very reluctant to share it with other people. You might
Mm,
share it with your partner, if you wake up, oh
mhm.
my God, did you hear that? But you're
Right.
very unlikely to speak about that with a medical professional.
You brought up a partner, and I'm curious if someone's listening and they have a partner who experiences sleep paralysis. And I know I also think of like the different recommendations we've heard about if you catch someone sleepwalking, which I'm wondering, is that a form of sleep paralysis, sleepwalking?
No, it actually takes place during a different stage of sleep. That's a non-REM related disorder. Sleep paralysis, the way to wrap your head around that, it's a combination of wakefulness and rapid eye movement sleep. So, rapid eye movement sleep is the stage where we're most likely to have really vivid dreams. We still
Right.
can. It's a misnomer. You can still dream during other phases, but
Right.
during other stages, but they're not as vivid. And so
Yes.
the unique parts of that are kind of the dream mentation. Everybody knows what dreams and nightmares are like, but also the paralysis. So kind of like the brainstem is the brainstem is implicated in exploding head syndrome and sleep paralysis because it keeps us paralyzed so we don't act out our dreams. So
Oh,
we think this,
oh, that makes a lot of sense because
yeah.
otherwise I had the funniest dream the other day. I think I was I
No,
think I
be
was
careful. I'm a psychodynamic therapist, so I might have to
well, I
interpret.
think I was anticipating my kids going to school and just like, I don't know, life changing and all this.
Yeah.
And I had this dream that this woman showed up and she was offering to babysit my kids and I was like, "No, I don't know you. Why
Mm.
are you at my door?" And in my dream, okay, the dream wasn't funny. What I did was funny. In the dream, I decided to like hand her almost like a parting gift for not babysitting, like a bottle of something, like I don't know, wine or something like, "Oh, but
Uh-huh.
thank you for coming and offering." And in my bed, I like remember doing this. I must have been partially awake. I took my pillow, I lifted it up and I plunked it on the bed upright like it was a
Hmm.
bottle that I was
Oh,
offering.
interesting.
And
Yeah.
I was literally like physically acting out what I was doing in the dream, which was also a very bizarre thing to be doing in the dream. Like, why am I offering a bottle of wine to some stranger wanting to watch my kids?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, are you saying that at that moment, my brainstem was not inhibiting my movement? Like, I might have been partially awake, but I was not aware I was awake?
Well, it's tricky, right? Because we don't generally have conscious awareness of our surroundings during sleep. So you could have had that could have been part of the dream element. I don't know if you
The
actually did it or
movement is what
not.
woke me up. Like, it kind
Oh,
of
okay.
lifted me.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
movement of moving my pillow, because that was so weird,
Right. Right.
I was like, did I just do that? And then I looked at the pillow a little bit like bleary-eyed and then went back to
Hmm.
sleep. And then woke up
Interesting.
later cracking up like, what did I just do? Why am I
Uh-huh.
sleeping
Uh-huh.
without my pillow?
Right. 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 Yeah, that can happen.
Hmm.
It's like I said, sleep's really complicated, so some of the stages can get mixed together in unusual ways. And in that
Yeah.
case, you weren't paralyzed. There is another disorder. It's kind of almost the opposite of sleep paralysis, called REM sleep behavior disorder. And
Okay.
this is where you're asleep, you are dreaming, but you are not paralyzed.
You're asleep,
So
you're dreaming. So kind of like what I was doing, but I don't have a disorder. It was just that
right.
one
Yeah, a
instance.
one-off
Yeah.
event I wouldn't worry about. But there are
No.
people who have this chronically, and for the one of the hallmarks is you're having dreams of being chased or attacked. So
Oh,
in
okay.
this case, there are documented cases of people actually hurting themselves, throwing themselves out of bed.
Oh
There's
man.
one documented case of one person killing their partner actually when they had a dream they were being
How did they
attacked.
even determine that that's what was actually happening?
Yeah, this person had a long history of they've been under
Oh,
sleep
that's
studies
traumatizing.
before. Yeah, yeah, I can't even imagine.
Oh my gosh.
But usually people that have this hurt them, are more likely to hurt themselves.
Right.
I was at a sleep conference in Prague, and I saw a video of an older gentleman who had this disorder, and the researcher actually recreated using sort of CGI
Yeah.
what they were experiencing. They were being attacked by a pterodactyl, and you see the man like moving his arms around trying to keep that beak away,
Right.
and so yeah, he at that moment was not paralyzed and was doing his best to protect himself from this attacker.
Now, to me, when you were saying trauma before, that feels like something that would be more linked with trauma. I'm even thinking of, did you ever watch Grey's Anatomy?
I haven't, I must
Okay,
say.
well, we can't be friends. No, I'm just kidding. There is a character in Grey's Anatomy, Owen, who is a veteran and he has
Uh-huh.
PTSD. And they had this whole storyline of how he would wake up and protect himself by hurting his partner in
Yeah.
bed. And it was this whole, like, how do we help you? And I'm wondering, I mean, that almost sounds like what that was, that what they were portraying. Is it more connected to trauma, that kind of disorder?
I haven't seen really close links to that. That doesn't mean they don't exist, but nothing's
Mm-hmm.
coming to mind. But you certainly do see an increase in nightmares with people with trauma, and
Right.
in REM sleep behavioral disorder, as I said, they're experiencing nightmares of being attacked. It is also associated with with neurodegenerative conditions. So one of the
Oh,
really scary findings that I saw was people that have REM sleep behavior disorder, if they legitimately have it, not like a one-off event like you're talking about, because
not like my
that's
bottle of
fairly
wine
normal.
pillow.
I've had that where I acted out a piece of a dream. But if you have that as a chronic condition,
Hmm.
within 10 years you have a very high probability of having a neurodegenerative condition like
Oh,
Parkinson's or
geez.
MS. Yeah,
Hmm.
so if there are people out there who are having it consistently where it's a problem, maybe they're hurting themselves, that's something they might want to get checked out for.
Hmm. Well, and especially promising, there's new research, luckily, looking at lifestyle changes and supplements. And gosh, there's even, did you see there's a study right now they're doing on GLP-1s with Alzheimer's?
I know there's been a slew of really good research, but I
I mean,
can't
just
think
wild
of that
stuff.
specifically.
So I guess I'm just saying, if you're hearing this and you're thinking, oh no, like I'm going to have one of these terrible issues,
Yeah,
you can get ahead of it and hopefully do something proactive for your health.
absolutely. Yeah.
Mhm.
And
So,
if you're concerned about things, like I said, don't be go to your doctors, talk to them about it.
yeah.
Because especially with these rare, lower base rate conditions that aren't well known, your doc probably isn't going to ask you about it directly. But that doesn't
Hmm.
mean that there's not something they can do. So when in doubt, check it out.
Hmm. And actually, I wanted to pick your brain on something related to trauma and sleep.
Okay.
I have conducted trainings on imagery rehearsal therapy. I have a huge passion when it comes to insomnia, probably selfishly because I used to suffer from it. I don't
Mm.
anymore. After honestly doing CBT, was very powerful for me, and some just lifestyle changes. But as far as trauma and memory consolidation and sleep.
Hmm.
So, the studies I've read showed that when we experience something really deeply traumatizing, like a death of a loved one or a disaster or something that's just almost too much for the nervous system to cope with and handle, part of the reason we sleep poorly directly after is not just because we're stressed and we have racing thoughts, but because when we're sleeping, our brain is working really hard to consolidate memories.
Mm.
And some of these things are too big, too scary, too painful that our consciousness does. And when I say consciousness, I'm not talking about this on some kind of existential level. I'm saying the way that we
Yeah.
experience consciousness in the brain does not want to consolidate these memories yet. We're not ready. And so our sleep will remain more shallow during that very, very acute time
Mm.
after a terrifying or terrible trauma happens until in our waking time, we've done enough of the processing or had enough of the support or time so that we can then allow for the more restful sleep where consolidation, meaning like we're kind of, I almost say it's like a filing cabinet, like we'll just store that over here and
Yeah, yeah.
kind of dust it and put it away. I'm so curious because you specialize in this area, what your thoughts are on that and if you've read anything related to that.
I mean, it's an intriguing idea, and it makes intuitive sense, and that's one of the functions of sleep. You know, sleep's so mysterious. We still don't know everything about it that we really
Right.
need to. But memory consolidation does seem to be an important factor, as well as kind of regulating our emotions. So that makes a lot of sense. And you see this in the content of nightmares sometimes, where you will have nightmares about things that are related or directly consistent with things that we've experienced. Even in sleep paralysis, where we're awake and we're having dream content. I've worked with several people who've been legitimate victims of violent crime who
Mm.
are hallucinating that their attacker is in the room with them while they're on their back and
Oh,
paralyzed.
that's so
That's
terrible.
nightmare fuel, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So there does seem to be a way that we are processing things while we are taking that brief respite from waking life that we get every night. And people that were acutely traumatized, they do not sleep well. They're hypervigilant, their thoughts are racing, they're trying to cope with their fundamental assumptions of safety being shattered before their eyes.
Yeah. And I think I bring it up not again, not as a way to say, "Uh-oh, guys, you're like you're screwed," but more
Yeah.
so like that gentle allowing, just knowing, okay, if I've gone through something deeply traumatizing and I'm in that acute, and acute to me, after going through something acutely traumatic, it's almost like time is shifting
Yeah.
and everything is cloudy and it's just there's a lack of groundedness. That's the phase where the sleep is really the most shaky. Just knowing that it's that's the temporary acute phase,
Yeah.
and knowing that giving that allowing giving your brain and your body time to do what it needs to do to heal, so that
Mhm.
knowing sleep will not be gone forever. I think when we
Yes.
get stressed about it being gone forever, it makes it so much worse.
Oh, yes. I mean, that's one of the biggest problem. One of the worst things you can do is try to go to sleep.
Absolutely. That's what I used to try to do. I had all the tricks.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you just had recently another person that does CBTI. I'm sure they talked about that. And they have certain mottos that or sayings that we tell our patients to sort of reassure them. If not tonight, then tomorrow night.
Oh, I
You
like
know,
that.
yeah, let's say I was a really evil psychologist and I had you in a lab and I was shocking you every time you were going to sleep.
Oh,
Eventually, your body would adapt to the extent that you would start having micro sleeps. You would start
interesting.
having really quick bursts, and your body, you build up a sleep debt, and the debt, it will be paid. There's one rare exception to this, which we could talk about, might scare the hell out of your audience. I don't want to do that, but
Oh, no, now I want to know. What is it?
there's a really rare condition called fatal familial insomnia. And this
What?
only attacks people. It's a genetic condition that
Okay.
usually strikes people, I believe, after they're 35, 36. So unfortunately, by the time a lot of folks have had kids, and they could potentially pass this on. But what happens is you stop sleeping.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, so just it can come on gradually, but you hit a point where you are no longer able to sleep, and you go through all the terrible things that happen with sleep deprivation. You
Hmm.
become moody, you start hallucinating, and eventually, tragically, you die in a really terrible way.
Good grief.
Yeah, so that's super rare. It's very unlikely that anybody that's even listening to this has it, or
Right.
even knows somebody who has it. But
Right.
that's oddly reassuring that we need to sleep and we will sleep, and there's only really one way that we
Right.
won't.
Well, and that's not similar to the phenomenon of as you get older, you tend to sleep less or need less.
No, no. This is a genetic condition. That's just sort of part of aging, where we sleep
Hmm.
a bit less. It can feel a little less restorative. Then you've also got some of the side effects of growing older. You might have to get up and disturb your sleep to go to the restroom multiple times per night, and all these things can really reduce people's quality of sleep, which is why in older populations you see an increase in insomnia.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
And as far as highly sensitive people, which is, quite a bit of the people that listen to this podcast, there is research showing that HSPs do tend to have incredibly vivid dreams and
Okay.
heightened anxiety in relation to sleep.
Mm.
Um, I'm wondering, in
Do you
your
mean in
opinion,
relation to going to sleep or in dreams or?
so because the anxiety throughout the day, like to use the computer analysis, there's more windows open for the
Okay.
HSP when they go to bed at night. And so being able to shut down all the windows, all the anxieties, all the things
Yeah.
that are on the
Yeah.
mind can be a little bit more difficult for an HSP versus someone who has a less active limbic system. And so I'm curious if you have any thoughts on whether you've read research about high sensitivity or you just have any of your own opinions on whether highly sensitive people might be more prone to have some of these issues. If you've seen any
Yeah.
difference in that.
Yeah, I haven't run across any studies with highly sensitive people in particular. The articles I read about that were some of the early ones, the psychometric articles that were trying to see, is it a unique construct? What's it correlated with? And from what I recall, some of the things it's correlated with are related to having problems with sleep. So being really sensitive to environmental stimuli, noise,
Mm-hmm.
particular noises, that's going to make it harder to go to sleep, especially if you're, say living in a, a flat in
Mm-hmm.
Manhattan or London.
Oh,
That's going to
right.
be really, really hard. I would guess that would not only decrease sleep quantity, but also sleep quality.
Mm-hmm.
People that tend to have high negative affect, trait neuroticism, they call that, which I know is correlated with HSPs as well. That is associated with poor sleep as well, and quality
And
and quantity.
can you unweed trait neuroticism, please?
Sure, sure. It's one of the fundamental big five personality traits, and people that are high in trait neuroticism tend to get activated and they tend to stay at a higher level of activation longer. Let's say a person with normal levels of negative affect neuroticism kind of go like that when they get activated. People that have higher NA will stay up there longer. It's harder for them to come down to a baseline. So if
Mm-hmm.
when they get upset, they will stay upset longer. If they get excited, they'll stay excited longer.
Mm.
And so that has been a well-known correlate of sleep problems as well.
I really relate to that personally, to be honest, as a
Hmm.
highly sensitive person who forever had insomnia issues. Like if I'm in a conflict with my husband, for instance, we could
Uh-huh.
have resolved it. We could have talked about it. He could have apologized, likely. Just kidding. And then it'll be like a couple, not days. I'm talking like
Yeah.
minutes or hours because
Sure.
I'm quite a processor, if you wouldn't
Yeah.
guess. I'll look at him, and thankfully, and I think this is a really key part of being in a relationship with a sensitive person as their partner, not take it personally if I look at him and I say, I know you apologize, but I'm still mad about it. Like I'll
Mm.
have to
Yeah.
kind of name it and express it and have that validation from the other person that it's okay that I guess I'm still feeling neurotic. I guess that's the term for what I'm doing. Or is that what you mean? Like when you hold like tension or anger or
It,
kind of a
it, it, it
negative
can be
affect?
that. I mean, yeah, you can actually from what I understand, you can genetically engineer mice. They're called rats, actually, Maudsley rats that are high in trait neuroticism. They get upset if they hear noises more easily than rats that don't have it. And
Oh,
so it's across the animal kingdom. And with
yeah,
humans, it of course gets complex. So in the
right.
example you were giving, there was some ruminative process that was going on inside of you that even though a part of you felt settled, a part of you still wasn't settled, and you were still
Hmm.
trying to work through, process, maybe understand the ramifications of what was going on. And when you're doing that before bed, it's just going to be terrible for your sleep, of
I
course.
love that you said that because there's literally been times where we'll be talking about something and you know that whole like don't go to bed angry thing?
Uh-huh.
I need a buffer. Like if there's something, some sort of conflict happening and it's 60 minutes, within 60 minutes of bedtime, we got to stop talking about it
Mm,
because whatever it is, it's going to keep ramping up my
yeah,
nervous
exactly.
system and make it less likely that I'm going to sleep.
Absolutely. And part of treating anything or doing anything, trying to do less of something that you don't like is really paying attention to yourself and making those observations. So one of the worst things you can do if you have insomnia is work out right before bed. So you
Oh, I
want to
can
work
see
out,
that.
you want to exercise, but you don't want to work out too close to bed. And so you by through knowing yourself know that if you're fighting too close to bedtime, that's going to keep you from sleep. So putting a kind of a bracket around that and hitting it in the morning if you can't get to a certain point makes a lot of sense.
This is kind of where, even though I love CBTI, there's aspects of it that don't really work for me because while CBTI is like, don't over subscribe to your bedtime routine, don't get too stressed about it, just allow
Yeah,
the natural course of sleep to happen.
exactly.
Because of being so sensitive to what you're saying, I've also noticed that, like, if I watch certain types of highly stimulating things, or if I work, or if basically do anything that keeps my activation up within that, it's really just 60 minutes is all I need.
Yeah.
It's going to so dramatically impact my sleep. But it also makes me think of research I've seen on folks with ADHD, where it takes them longer, their nervous system, to transition from, I'm here versus I'm asleep. And so
Yeah.
recommendations I actually wrote in my book about sleep with ADHD is your environment, things like dropping the lights, turning down the TV, like things to kind of reduce the stimulation, because the ADHD brain can't go from lights on to lights off and transition quickly to sleep. There needs to be like a couple steps in between.
Yeah. 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 And some of the things that we do just are really making our chances for falling asleep worse. Like I said, we can't really force ourselves to go to sleep. We can't try. But what we can
Right.
do is maximize our chances for success. And so
Mm.
we do things that help us and we avoid doing things that will hurt us. So, we're still kind of wired like early humans, that didn't have
Hmm.
artificial light. We when in a natural state, we would be paying attention to the sun. Humans aren't very good in the dark, so that's probably another reason that we sleep, so we don't get ourselves into trouble with
Right. Right.
animals that are much better at nighttime vision than us. So that being the case, one of the worst things you can do is have your phone and tablet on really bright as you're trying to go to sleep. You're giving your body a signal that you're in daytime. You should be awake right now. So cutting off that source of stimulation, especially if you really are sensitive to light, for instance, would make a lot of sense. You know, maybe doing something light around the house. Reading a relatively boring novel as opposed to a page turner, and then
Hmm.
when you're starting to feel tired, going to bed and doing that. As you know from CBTI, there are
Hmm.
only two things you're supposed to be doing in bed, and one of them sleeping.
Right. Hmm.
So
Yep.
other
And the other.
things, doing work, no go.
Right.
Doing entertainment, it's not what you want to do. If you're not an insomniac, it's fine. But if you are having
Right.
problems sleeping, then you do have to make some changes in your life that might not be fun, but will benefit you in the long run. Because we do know that chronic sleep problems, they're associated with a lot of health problems. And
Absolutely.
and there's a bidirectional relationship with insomnia and certain anxiety disorders, for instance.
And something you just said, I think, is interesting too, about humans not being good in the dark
Yeah.
and our survival and making sure that we're not getting eaten by, lions and tigers and
Hmm.
bears. Again, it's making me think of the difference in sleep for the ADHDers, because ADHD brains do best in biphasic sleep, where you're sleeping twice per day.
Hmm.
Because if we think about, the ADHD brain is constantly scanning. And so it would make sense that even with a sliver of light, the
Yeah.
ADHD brain in the cave would be alert enough to protect the pack, because they're the ones staying up later. When we look at the way that melatonin gets released later in the day for ADHD brains, it's I don't know if you've done some ADHD research on sleep,
I
but it is a
haven't, no.
wild frontier. It's
Yeah.
really interesting to dive into. If we think about all the things that you know of sleep and what you've learned about sleep, I'm curious if you have anything that you think for anyone listening today who maybe really struggles with, for instance, I was mentioning my client who suffers from the sleep paralysis
Hmm.
and the fears that come with sleep.
Yeah.
I heard you say things about like regulating your sleep, making sure you have good routines.
Hmm.
Is there anything else beyond that that they can do, or is that, in your opinion,
For sleep
it?
paralysis, your sleep paralysis patient specifically, yeah. One of
Yeah.
the easiest things they can do is not sleep on their back.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
So lots of studies replicated finding that sleeping on your back, you're going to make yourself most likely to have sleep paralysis. Sleeping on your stomach, next most likely, and sleeping on your side is the best one. So we were talking about partners. One of the things your partner can do for you if you have sleep paralysis is kind of roll you over if they see you're on your stomach or your back. Another thing to
Wow.
do is, recognize that this is sleep paralysis. You don't really have a malevolent demon on your chest strangling you. You're not being abducted by aliens, which are very common experience. I won't say common, but they are experiences that people have with sleep paralysis because they're so vivid. People will believe that they actually did undergo some paranormal event. And having sleep paralysis once, 8 years after I started studying, and I would begrudge nobody for believing based on how vivid it is.
Right.
So one of the things is reassure yourself, well, this is sleep paralysis. This will go away as soon as I'm able to move again. The hallucinations will go away, and I'll be back to normal. There's some evidence that just trying to move a body part, like concentrating on moving your finger or your big toe, can get you out of it a bit quicker. But really, you
Oh,
just need to calm yourself down, try to breathe, recognize, okay, this is kind of a strange mixing of my sleep stages here and wakefulness, and nothing bad is going to happen. Nobody's ever died from having sleep paralysis. It's
right.
not a dangerous phenomenon.
Even if you feel like you're going to.
It's an upset, exactly, but it's a very upsetting phenomenon. And even in that case, I developed a brief cognitive behavioral treatment for it. There's a meditation-based treatment for it, and a number of medications have a side effect of inhibiting REM sleep a bit. So that's a side effect if you're treating depression, but if you're trying to help someone with sleep paralysis, that side effect would be the main thing you're trying to go for.
Oh, that makes sense. I've seen that. I've seen that with my clients who have started medications or maybe they need adjusting.
Yeah.
I'm curious with the side versus stomach versus back.
Hmm.
It makes me think of how individuals who have sensitive nervous systems, whether it be autism or a variety of other reasons, tend to sleep better with a weighted blanket. And I'm curious if someone is naturally a back sleeper, but they experience sleep paralysis. Do you think the addition of a weighted blanket might help a little bit? If they're like, oh, God, I'm a back sleeper, what do I do?
Yeah, it depends because you also see this in folks that have a sleep apnea, and the apnea episodes are worse generally when folks are on their back, especially if they're carrying a bit more weight. That
Hmm.
will serve as a potential sleep disruptor.
Right.
And if pregnant women have a lot of problems with sleep paralysis,
Oh
believe
my
it or not,
gosh. Yeah.
presumably it's the actual. I think this is still the case, but last time I researched this, that was the only parasomnia or sort of a sleep disorder that actually increases over the course of pregnancy.
Was that the
Sleep paralysis, yeah. The other
oh,
ones,
okay.
you'll see a brief uptick in the first trimester, and that tends to go
Right.
away. But sleep paralysis, it seems more linear and likely due to the fact, well, it's going to disrupt your sleep and you've got this weight. And if you accidentally roll over on your back,
Yeah.
you're going to,
Right, and you can't breathe
yeah,
as well. I think I had
exactly.
excess pillow syndrome during too many pillows. I recently heard a really wild thing about weight gain that when we first start to gain weight, we actually gain weight in the tongue and the back area of the tongue, which is why snoring is one of the like earliest signs of weight gain because it's all being concentrated right there.
Huh, I had not heard that. Interesting. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, a legitimate doctor I heard this from. So, I mean, it just makes me, I always wonder about when our bodies do certain things, like evolutionarily, why is that an advantage? Like, why did we evolve that way where that's where our weight goes first?
Yeah. Yeah, boy, I don't know. I'll have to ponder that.
I know. Please unpack that and let me know. Stay connected. Let me know what you think. Um, Gosh, Brian, you have been so interesting to talk to. I mean, I feel like I could continue picking your brain. I really appreciate getting to sit down with someone who is so passionate about what they're doing that they just learn all these nooks and crannies, and also that you're willing to say, I don't know. I
Yeah,
think that's really important too, letting ourselves know when we don't know something so we can go explore it. But again, I really want to thank you because I feel like there are definitely people, specifically, I'm thinking of my client, who have struggled with this for a long time, and it's very scary.
absolutely.
And it feels like there's nothing you can do, but you gave us actual things they can do today. Not that it's going to erase it, but
Hmm.
I'm really grateful because I really think it's going to be so helpful.
Yeah.
So keeping
You
in mind
never
everything,
know.
what was
Uh,
that?
I was going to say, you never know. You might have actually helped a bunch of people with exploding head syndrome. Two papers have shown that just learning about it, learning that this is what it is, actually leads to a reduction in having episodes.
Fantastic.
Isn't that wild? So you never know. This
That's so
podcast could have helped
wild.
somebody just from listening to us two jabbery therapists.
And what a compassionate thing too. If you're listening and you know someone who has ever struggled with you can share this with them as, a little piece of medicine for them. So
Hmm.
that's excellent.
Yeah.
So is there anything related to your passion on sleep and monsters that go bump in the night that we did not talk about that you want to impart on the guests? And also, where can they keep up with you and keep learning from you?
Yeah, well, I like to write books about strange things. So I actually just wrote my first popular press book called Monsters on the Couch, the real psychological disorders behind your favorite horror movies, where we look into the real phenomena behind a horror movie monsters. So instead of depictions of like the Wolfman on the silver screen, are there people who actually believe they turn into animals and acquire that animal's characteristics? And the answer is yes. And
Whoa.
they're not always wolves. I found a peer-reviewed article on a gentleman who believed he turned into a gerbil.
A gerbil.
A gerbil, yes. Yeah.
Wow. Random.
So, yeah. And there were snakes, there were cats, which is called ailuranthropy. And so, yeah, I go through in pop culture way. I get into the folklore of a lot of the myths you see displayed on movies, and get into the real psychological disorders that some people have. And even though they're very strange, there are treatment options for all of them. So even if somebody has something exceedingly rare, exceedingly troubling, there are very few things that can't be helped.
I love that. Well, thank you so much, Brian, for coming on the show. And stay connected. Let me know if you find out anything about the ADHD brain with sleep and the fat tongue syndrome. Not that it's a syndrome. Now I'm just throwing words out there.
Sure.
But thank you, everyone, for being part of this conversation, and sleep well and be well.
Cheers.